Hi, fellow geochemists.
Again, sorry. You have to say one, two, three.
Hi, one, two, three. Hi, fellow geochemists and geochemistry enthusiasts. Welcome to GeOCHemISTea, the only podcast for people who love geochemistry with a side of tea. Our mission is to inspire aspiring geochemists and to introduce our listeners to niche geochemistry topics. I'm your host, Sam Scher, and this month we're talking with Cristal Palafox about hyperspectral core imaging and how it is changing the way in which geoscientists are seeing porphyry deposits. Cristal Palafox is the regional senior spectral geologist for the Americas at CoreScan. Cristal, welcome to GeoChemistry.
My pleasure, Sam. I'm so excited to share your space with you.
Cristal is a spectral geologist with 20 years of industry experience spanning mineral exploration and spectral geology. She started out working in near mine and mine exploration in Mexico before crossing many borders to become the reigning queen of spectroscopy in Latin America. At this point, Cristal, how many different mineral deposits have you worked on?
That's a good question. My main experience in exploration is with hydrothermal deposits, porphyries, and high and low sulfidations. Also, I have experience with skarns and crystal gold.
So just what, 1,000 deposits at this point? 500, somewhere around
Yeah,
there. Many.
yeah, something like that.
I love that. Okay. Between 500 and 1,000 deposits. I love it. So, Cristal, could you tell our listeners how you got into geology and into spectral geology?
Was the destiny, my friend. I fell in love with mineralogy when I was in university. And around that time, the University of Sonora got its X-ray diffraction laboratory. So I start working in academic research projects. And when graduated, I got a job in exploration company because of my experience with X-ray diffraction, but now for working with infrared potable spectrometer. So I worked for 10 years in exploration using spectroscopy to understand alteration systems. I took a break after that to do my master's in ore deposits and afterwards began working with CoreScan, working over the last 6 years at CoreScan with my colleagues and clients. This I consider my master's in spectroscopy.
You're not wrong because I also feel like my time working in CoreScan was definitely some kind of master's class for spectroscopy. Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that said, what advice could you give our listeners who are interested in spectral geology?
Unfortunately, spectroscopy is not something that is taught in universities yet. So, a good way to go is to start looking for papers and literature related to spectroscopy to start seeing and learning about the spectra. And of course, approach companies and expert professionals that can guide.
And I would add to that, even if you're not going to go into a company to train as a spectral geologist, which there are opportunities out there now with so many spectral geology companies popping up. I worked in business development in a highly technical role. And from that, I learned a ton about spectroscopy. Listeners, I would say any interaction that you have or ability to work with a spectral geology company, you're going to learn a lot. So it's definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, just take any opportunity you have to learn about the spectroscopy.
I always love your stories, Cristal. And so I want to thank you first for taking our path for this path from mining to spectroscopy. But now it's my favorite segment, which is tea time. And it's time to spill. But let me just rephrase that for you, just so you know, because Cristal's first language is Spanish. In Mexican Spanish, I would say, dame el chisme.
Yeah, okay. Wait. I really like funny stories with my gringa geochemist friend, Sam, and we have a lot. But I remember one conferences in Mexico always have a lot of mariachi and tequila.
Mhm.
Once we were at the Acapulco conference, and Sam was really excited to drink a lot of tequila in party. We were with a group of friends just starting the party, and Sam was already really drunk and fell asleep at 9 p.m. while we were all partying until 3 a.m. to start the conference again at 9 a.m. But she can't because she's a ringa and it's quick. And that's the reason because why everyone should come to Mexican conferences.
Let me just say though, it's not like we started drinking at even 6. These guys are so strong. They're starting at I've seen the tequila open as early as 10, 11 in the morning. So it's not a 2-hour window here. I do get a little excited, but I feel like my problem is always that I'm going 1 for 1 with you guys, and I should know by now that that's just not in my capability because I am weak as a gringa. I can't do what you guys do.
But you're learning, you're learning.
Yeah, I'm getting better. I'm getting better. Yeah, 2 for 1, and also, yeah, having a lot more Tecate Light, I think, is definitely the answer, which I learned a new word for, but I'm not gonna share it here, but the Mexicans would enjoy it. Alright, we'll say it. What was it again? It was yogur natural for the Tecate Light,
Oh,
yeah? Yes.
take it light. Yeah, you're learning the
Yes.
rest.
Eso, okay. Oh my god. Great time. Alright, so listeners, you should know that Cristal has been working the last 3 years on a lot of porphyries, and she's completely fallen in love with them, maybe even a little bit more than some of her other babies, which would be the other deposit styles that she works on. But for this episode, she really wanted to talk about spectroscopy and porphyry copper deposits. We're both stumped really on a good paper, but I did recall our former chief geologist at Korsky had written a paper for the Exploration 17 conference, which I've posted on the website, which you guys can all take a look at. And it's a landmark paper for hyperspectral core imaging. And I really encourage everyone to have a look at it. And it describes the background of hyperspectral and imaging. True, it does focus a bit more on core scan, but at the time there was really only 2, maybe 3 systems on the market when she had written the paper, which just goes to show how interesting the market space is now, where there's about, I would say, about 20 or so companies that do core imaging, which is very cool. And as a case study, it delves into the Namosi porphyry in Fiji, which at the time was a Newcrest deposit. And this had input from both Corscan and Newcrest. So it's actually pretty interesting to see what they all came up with. So first question, what is spectral geology and what is hyperspectral?
Okay, spectroscopy is the study of the absorption and emission of electromagnetic radiation, for example, light, by matter, measured as wavelength or frequency. In the case of geology, the matter will be rocks, and it is a tool for characterizing the structures of atoms and molecules of the minerals present in the rock. These molecular vibrations result in absorption features at null positions or wavelengths that can be used as a fingerprint for mineral identification. And hyperspectral is a term that denotes too many spectral bands, referring to the hundreds of contiguous spectral bands that comprise the system or instrument. This detail helps to identify not only certain minerals, but also the species of the mineral.
There's so much opportunity to work on different deposits and everything. Why are porphyries your favorite deposit to work on?
I really enjoy working on all types of deposits, but I have a special fondness for porphyries because I started working with porphyries when I first got into hyperspectral. So extracting that spectral information in a porphyry is particularly fun.
And I have to say, because when I started first working in spectral, I was living in Chile in porphyry country. And I it's funny because I always thought that they would be 10 minerals, a few wavelengths, and you're done. But I started to notice really quickly, especially with the imaging, where you could see all these changes and very minute differences within the deposits and amongst deposits, even ones that were right next door to each other, just how different they could be. So I have to agree, for something that's maybe on the surface seems like a little bit boring compared to a skarn, which has 40 different minerals in it. I also found a really true love of porphyries too.
Yeah.
Keeping that in mind, how can we use hyperspectral imaging data at these porphyry deposits?
The mineralogy data that you can get can help you to create deposit scale petrographic models with quantifiable outputs. It is also useful for observing mineralogical characteristics of the deposits on a small scale and determining mineralogical patterns in mineralization vectors.
Yeah, it's so true. And found that a lot of clients, the biggest problem that they have is just these are really pretty pictures. These are super interesting, but what do we do next with them? And what's cool about imaging is that you can see all these images and they are really helpful for say like a core logging or to really understand 4 different generations of illite white mica that you may have because you can see all of that. But with these outputs that you get, it's all the mineralogy with all these different compositional information in a CSV output. And then you can take that, you can use it in IOGAS, you can use it in R, Python. I hesitate to say Excel because that's just crazy talk, but you can use it in any of these different programs to interpret just like you would with geochemical data, just like you would put geochemical data into a 3D model. You can put it into a 3D model and start to model where is your white mica zone, where is your chlorite zone, and start to really understand things in a three-dimensional way. And also with all of the images now, there is opportunity for a lot of textural analysis and there's a lot of good papers out there as well. We're both obviously not experts in that, so we won't talk about it. But it's pretty cool all the different things that you can do. So it's really interesting when I first started out, it was just the criticism was just like this is just a pretty picture. But now there's just so much knowledge of different things that you could do with it, and I just love that. That's my 2 cents. One of the things that people have a lot of trouble with when you get one of these outputs is you'll see all that mineralogy information and then you'll see all these mineral compositions. So, really, what is the difference between mineralogy and mineral compositions? And then, really, how can we use them to improve our understandings of porphyry?
One of the characteristics of high resolution hyperspectral instruments is not only to identify the mineralogy by that set of absorption features that form its characteristic spectra or fingerprint, but also the composition of that mineral. There are certain minerals groups that only with a small wavelength position shifting in one of their characteristic features are indicating changes in the mineral compositions. And how can it help? That the subtle changes in the composition of the mineral, for example, an iron-rich chloride versus a magnesium-rich chloride could help you to find vector to grade or high grade zones, for example.
And that's something that the authors looked into in the paper about Namosi
Yeah.
was looking at these different chlorates, which was really unique in the sense of looking at the chlorate composition in porphyry to see changes in grade. I really haven't seen that too often. That's why it's always interesting to go back to that paper because a lot of times when I'm looking at porphyry deposits, the chlorates aren't really telling much of a story. But I guess some other ones that we know of, biotites have a compositional change, amphiboles. What are some of the other ones?
Yeah, or maybe I just was thinking while reading the paper that maybe that iron rich chloride is related to these minerals, biotite or
Mm,
amphiboles.
sure, that's a really good point because that paper was written back in 2015. As a follow up, what has been the most impactful use of mineral compositional features to use at porphyries? Because as we were just talking about, like the chloride in this case were, but not necessarily in all the porphyry.
Yeah, good question. Yes, I think white mica is one of the most important mineral groups in a porphyry. And to have the composition and crystallinity values always impact the interpretation, especially when you see those amazing changes in veins and alteration halos that cannot be appreciated by the naked eye. Also, chloride, biotite, as you were saying, composition is always interesting in porphyry deposits.
Yeah, and I remember sharing I did a SCG course one time, I think it was back in 2019, and I was able to share some images from one of the porphyries that I was working on at the time, and in that one, I thought the coolest was we had, at that porphyry, separated out illite from the muscovite white mica family, and then we also had then in the white mica family, we had the paragonites, muscovites, and phengites, and so you could see both in this section, you could see background illite stringers, like, all throughout, and then cross-cutting and obviously different temperatures, times, and phases and everything, but cross-cutting these, you could also see more of those B-style veins of the different I think this one was just really just different muscovites surrounding chalcopyrite, and it was just gorgeous stuff that, yeah, to the naked eye, you could see that those veins, that was no big deal, but you see all these, like, illite stringers, different from the illite matrix, different from also it had a muscovitic something else in there as well that was really interesting, and it was just, like, this really powerful thing that you could really only see with the core imagery.
Yeah, it's a lot that you can do with hyperspectral imaging in porphyries.
Yeah, and it also highlights too, it's super powerful if your only ability at site is to use a Terraspec because 'cause you're already getting some information from your Terraspec, but that's just one point in a sea of when you have a core scanning machine where you have thousands to millions of pixels in a meter, right? So it's a completely different ball game of what you're capturing and what you're actually able to see, and then from there to interpret from there in terms of perhaps some paragenesis. So, what are some of the things that you've been working on with your colleagues to improve the application of hyperspectral to porphyries?
We are always looking to improve all deposits interpretation, including porphyries. Overall, having better resolution instruments which can give us more spectral characteristics of the minerals and therefore more data to find specific characteristics of the deposit's mineralogy is what we are constantly working on.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites about that too was a Chilean deposit with one of the spectral geologists, but I hadn't ever realized that because of how, if you will, the fingerprinting of spectroscopy works, you have biotite, you have chlorite, and those are distinct minerals, as we know, but hydrothermal biotite is not really biotite in a spectral sense. So I found it really cool the way that the geologists were working to be able to pull out the thermal biotite in terms of its unique spectral signature. In that sense, is it able to just blanket apply hydrothermal biotite anywhere, or is it unique to deposits? Is every deposit different for hydrothermal biotite?
Yeah, every deposit is different, but one of the advantages that you have with hyperspectral imaging is that you can see the texture of the minerals. It's easier for us to detect where you have the hydrothermal biotite versus the magmatic biotite. We can go and pick those characteristics of the biotite and trying to differentiate in the interpretation. But every project is different.
So cool. I remember the first time I, as a non-spectroscopist, was trying to explain this to somebody, to a client, and they were like, "But it's biotite."
Yeah, biotite is biotite always.
Yes. Then the other one, and I'm sorry I'm going off script here, but I'm just getting excited. But the other one that's been really interesting has been, particularly when we're with Chilean clients, would be the Cerecita verde versus the gray cerecite versus just regular white mica.
Yeah, that is something that we are always working on, trying to identify those mineral assemblages that make your cericita verde. It's very interesting. We can do it. We can do it almost all the time.
No big deal. The other, oh
Yeah.
my God, now we're just on a roll here. But the other one too is you have the problem that feldspars are inactive in the veneer square, but I've seen you guys be able to map some of them. How do you guys do that?
We can do proxies and we have to be very cautious about that. But yeah, we can develop proxies for feldspar because we know the behavior of the feldspar in veneer and sphere. And of course, the imaging helps you a lot because you can see again the colors and the texture of the mineral in the photography.
So interesting. We could go on all day. That said, we're talking about some interesting features there. But what has been the most interesting deposit that you've worked on, and also why?
Come on, Sam. You know I cannot choose only one. Each deposit has its charm, from interesting mineralogy and compositions, mineral assemblages, textures, but above all, what is more interesting for me is to discover what the project geologists do afterwards with the spectral data, alteration maps, paragenesis, and models that confirm the great utility of spectral geology.
Honestly, that's actually a really good point because with this data set, any type of technology implementation, it's not so much that it's a huge amount of data as much as it's this data set that's there's no easy recipe for integration into a workflow. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of focus that a lot of times geologists don't have because they have to do 1,000 other things on a project. But when you get a project champion that is all in and they can put together and so a lot of times as a team, and they can put together all this interpretation to create a really cohesive story, whether it's something for exploration or geomets, environmental, and they can show a purpose for it. And then their implementation goes so far as that this project continues to send core so that they can continue to update their models and everything. It becomes this really powerful backbone that I've definitely seen in a few places that has been extraordinary. So that's actually a really powerful point. My
Yeah.
favorite, if you wanna know, I feel like scarns are always my favorite, but I have to pick a porphyry. Okay, my favorite porphyry. I need to think. Let's see. Oh, I wanna just call one out, but you're right, it's so hard because they're all I think what makes it really hard isn't just is one more beautiful than the other, but has one had more invested geologists that have asked their spectral geologists to do additional products that have made it a really spectacular project. If you just go with a first pass kind of 80/20 style interpretation and you don't customize your library anymore, then it's just okay, this is a cute porphyry. But if a geologist or a team gets really into it and they pull as much information from that data set that they can, then that's when these projects get really extraordinary and you're like, oh my God, look at these 2 generations of illite. Look at these 3 generations of white mica veins. That's
Yeah.
when it gets crazy. Yeah. So, no, that's a super good point, and I think it's, like, a really beautiful place to end on. Are you guys gonna write a paper? Anything? Is anything coming out soon from CoreScan? We're too busy.
No, we are busy, but paper, no.
Okay,
No, no.
okay. Because we just want to see more data. I think as the public, we just want to see data. We want to see what people are doing with it. And I think that would just be really enriching. So I'm not saying what you guys should do, but I think that would be cool.
Maybe when we are not too busy now, we will think in writing a paper. It's for courses in the plants, but not
Okay.
for the
Not for
short.
today.
Yeah, it's not for today.
Not for I love it. All right. I just want to thank you so much for being here, Cristal. And I hope that you enjoy talking about this on the show as much as I liked hearing a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes in core imaging. I want to thank everybody for listening to GeoChemISTea, and a big thanks to Cristal Palafox for being on the show, dishing some tea and talking about spectral geology with us. Thanks to our sponsor, LKI Consulting, and to It's Water and Coma Media for our music. And I'm looking forward to chatting with everybody next month.
Thank you.